Once, on a particularly lethargic day at work, in a moment of office stagnation and fatigue, I realized it actually wouldn't make a difference if I was playing an RTS, since this is about the same level of excitement I get from those, too. Let's talk about real-time strategy games. If sitting around accomplishing nothing sounds like a good time to you, check your back for encroaching fungus, because you're probably a literal sloth. You're also the demographic for RTS games, but that's a different handicap entirely. Anyway, making an RTS is easy because nothing, least of all the dev cycle, is expected to move quickly. So if it takes you 15 years to turn out the sequel, that's fine. Korea will still play it. Therefore, you can take all the time in the world to make some isometric angle maps with random hills, valleys, and resource spawn points that are way too far away from the base camps, you filthy jerks. Why would you put it over there? I can't even begin to make progress on this stupid map, you... I mean, after the maps are polished to the point where they are perfect, an irrelevant fact due to everyone keeping their camera as far out as humanly possible, like we were watching the action from the bird's eye view of a majestic eagle carrying a telescope, you can make the obligatory 3 factions. What 3 factions, you ask? Well, any 3 factions, be they fictional or based on actual history, but always 3. There's always the big guys who are resource-intensive and slow to build, but each individual unit's a powerhouse. The small, speedy ones who require nothing to produce and upkeep but have the HP of moistened rice paper, and then there's the guys in the middle. Play a few rounds to each to find out which will be meta-dominant, and then ignore the other 2 entirely, so that way you can get around to getting to the esports part of the equation. Which, if you're lucky, is literally never, because RTS games can only be made more boring by watching them in lieu of playing. You can take on a sci-fi or a fantasy motif if that's your thing, but personally I prefer historic-themed strategy games, because not only do you get to crow on about how educational your game is by copy-pasting blurbs from history text, but then you get to do things like showing up to a war with your rivals armed with steel weapons and armor just as they're figuring out bronzesmithing. For historical context, that would be sort of like time traveler showing up in the 100 Years' War with AK-47s. Motifs aside, the core gameplay is the same as you conquer resources like mines, rivers, towns, and rival-held resource locations in order to sit on your hands for a while and build up your forces, while the AI players suck their thumbs and rival humans attempt to Zerg rush you at the earliest possible moment. If you're like me and don't have friends, but you want the experience of receiving a Zerg rush for yourself, you always have the option of eating nothing but Chipotle for lunch for several days straight. It's like that, but somehow more painful. So just copy a map of Europe and parts of Africa and Asia, plop down some countries and some resource locations, and most of the work is already done. Music needs to come from either the elevator genre or the intense Celtic metal subgenre, with no particular segues in between them. Once you have that, just pay some bored people out the street and provide some voice lines for your various rulers, and you're on your way. While beta testing, make sure that 80% of the game involves sitting on your hands and that sufficient time is made to roast an oven-perfect turkey before any legitimate action ever gets underway. But once it does, make sure it's hectic and crowded enough that subpar processors drop frames like clumsy optometrists. Once the action in an RTS starts, it basically doesn't stop till one side or the other is completely annihilated, so make sure that no actual war tactics work either. Things like positioning and unit management should all be handled automatically. Never, ever give your players any sense of agency, or even worse, strategy in your strategy game. If you accidentally break ground and have a legitimate understanding of history and warfare tactics and related scientists end up giving your players a leg up, this will raise expectations for your expansion sequels. Sequels that will come out in 15 years, yes. After all, we don't want to be bothered to reinvent the entire genre until at least the 8th installment of Sid Meier's to be believed. So be sure you don't, that way the bar's set nice and low for RTS 2, RTS harder. Once you have absolute mediocrity down to a fine art, you're more or less set for your franchise. Just keep telling your fans that the sequel is totally coming. Really, all you need to do is keep releasing expansion packs to your first game, gradually expanding the map a couple 100 miles across Eurasia until you suddenly have Nobunaga's ambition pressing lawsuits. Congrats! You can now turn a lump of meh. You can shoot for so much more and make it bigger, faster, and more in-depth, but hey, expansion pack sales are good, so I'm the idiot here, so you're welcome. Okay, this is phoned in compared to the others. Just this once, I'm going to make this a twofer, only because RTS is not really my genre of choice, so I hope this makes it up to you. Hey guys, you want to make a MOBA? Start by looking in a mirror. Make sure you can plainly see yourself without too much difficulty. Take a rubber mallet in your dominant hand, then place your offhand flat on the counter. Hit your offhand with this mallet until you realize that this is a bad idea. Literally, nothing good has ever come from MOBAs. Just don't do it. Congrats, you avoided contributing another mistake into a pool of mistakes. You're welcome.